Welcome. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down some thoughts on VUCA world. This is going to be part of a larger 10-part series, and that 10-part series will be the introduction to a masterclass, to a series of trainings I'm posting inside of our school community. And I'm really excited about that. So I'm just gonna go right off the cuff. First of all, why a selfie video while I'm driving? Well, first of all, I've come to realize a few things, having served as a fractional COO for a number of visionary CEOs in small businesses over the last decade. And that is, most of them have a hard time paying attention to something for a long period of time. So the likelihood that this video is repurposed into nice little static assets and carousels and AI deep dive conversations that use colloquial dialogue to get the point across, and presentations that are 2 minutes long and too long didn't read summaries is like guaranteed. I think the only people that will actually end up cutting through this are those who are, what I would say, cut from the same cloth as me, individuals that would view themselves in the spirit of an expeditionary leader, not a visionary, not a integrator alone, but an expeditionary. You think of Shackleton and his Antarctic expedition. He very much had a vision, and he very much was a operator. He was capable in a tactical capacity. He was able to maneuver and make decisions on the ground. He understood the details while maintaining the big picture vision. Some people will call that high-low leadership. Whatever you want to call it, it's the thing to be in my experience. So, expeditionary leaders unite. Now let's talk a little bit about the purpose of this video lesson specifically. What is VUCA? VUCA. VUCA is an acronym derived from the military. The defense world refers to this acronym when talking about the environmental realities we face. They are volatile, they are uncertain, they are complex, and there's ambiguity. VUCA constitutes a description, a holistic description of the realities we face in the operating environment. It's a way to remember what's out there. Volatility is distinct from the other three, from the four total variables. They all are distinct, they are all complementary and overlapping. This is why they're together. Volatility. Things are changing rapidly. An easy way to cognitize this in a commercial setting is the stock market, is cryptocurrency, it's consumer preferences. There's volatility. There's things that are changing. You can imagine a sea during a storm. The waves are going to and fro. It's hard to find a level surface, indeed, because there are none. If you found a level surface, it may very well be an iceberg that is in the process of melting, breaking apart, and casting you down into the frigid, unforgiving, shark-infested waters. There's a book, I'll stop there with a subtle nod towards a bit of a mortal humor, dark humor. As a Marine infantry guy, I think you'll have to excuse me for that. Nonviolent communication in the workplace is something that they say is a critical ingredient for a healthy, high-performance culture. So I'll do my best to instill that and lead by example, though that certainly is the one I have the most contention with. VUCA, volatility. Things change a lot. Get used to it. It's one of the most obvious statements you'll probably hear all day, all week, maybe even all year. Volatility is first. It's everywhere. Motion is life. There is no homeostasis, truly. There's entropy and exotropy. There's growth and there's decay. If you're training your muscles in the gym, they're getting stronger. they're technically breaking down, and when you're resting, they rebuild to grow stronger. That's the hypertrophy process. But the point is, there's growth and there's decay. If you're not training for weeks, months, and years, trust me, all that muscle you built during the time you were training is reducing. It's decaying. You are suffering from atrophy. So in the same way, that is reflected throughout life, throughout reality, across sectors, across domains, private sector, public, defense, it doesn't matter. There is motion, there is movement, there is volatility. Okay, uncertainty. VUCA, V is volatility, U is uncertainty. There's a big idea about making decisions based on the information you have at the time. For example, you look back through the Battle of Mogadishu in Somalia. You look back through the Battle of Fallujah and Ramadi and the battles in Marja province, Afghanistan, and the list goes on all the way to current day battles and all the way back until ancient days. Commanders and warriors in the field of battle have to make decisions based on the information available to them at the time. For example, there's a great book by Stephen Pressfield, and it's called Virtues of War, and it's about the campaigns of Alexander the Great. And it's a historical fiction that does an outstanding job at captivating the reader or the listener if you're an audiobook person. And it does a just terrific job bringing you into these scenes, into the fold of these battle lines, ancient battle lines of horses and carriage and archers and phalanx, shield men and spearmen and all of this. And one thing I never appreciated being born in the 90s, is how much dust and dirt and fog and smoke was present during these ancient battles. You can imagine thousands of men clashing in the sand, thousands of horses running and stirring up dust and fires and everything else. The visibility was very low. And that is an interesting way to consider uncertainty. Now, there's certainly more commercially relevant ways to consider uncertainty, and I'll touch on that in a moment. But fundamentally, at a principled level, uncertainty is the what is at the other side of the range of our flashlight at night. When you've got a flashlight and you're shining it into a dark field and it only illuminates 15 feet out, 50 feet out, right? And there's a cone of light you can see, but to the left and right of that, beyond that, it's dark and there's no starlight, there's no moonlight. That is the uncertainty. That's the outside of the perimeter. In the same way of Alexander the Great having to make decisions based on the information he had available to him at the time, based on what he was reasonably certain of, he couldn't see exactly what was happening on his far right flank due to the visual impairment of the smoke, of the dust. As an example, he would just have to make decisions, and based on secondhand information, based on gut feeling, based on experience, expertise, etc. So, likewise, in modern warfare, when we, as leaders, as expeditionary or operational leaders, are in the environment and we make a judgment call and we execute based on that judgment call, it may not be perfect. It may actually be wrong. But countless situations indicate times when a judgment call was made based on relevant information that they had available at the time that ended up being wrong, yet they were indemnified from that because they didn't have the full picture available to them. So what is the so what there? It is an impossibility to have all of the information all of the time available to you. So you have to just be aware of that. That doesn't mean we don't try to be well informed and have the most effective insights we can, and we're going to talk more about that in follow-on lessons, but I'll move forward. So uncertainty, there's always going to be a level of uncertainty. Our job as entrepreneurs, as Alexander Osterwilder says, is to reduce uncertainty and risk. So let's proceed to the C, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, and complexity. Complexity is pretty standard. It's pretty straightforward. No one is going to be surprised to hear that modern business is complex, that military operations is complex. Human endeavor is relatively complex. Whether you're sitting down to play a board game, whether you're engaging in a military campaign, or you're trying to put an advertising strategy together, all of that is complex. Especially if you've got an anthropological lens to that, if you've got a high degree of scrutiny to consider what is being done under the hood, what is being done on a behavioral level, on a relational level, on a material level, what atoms are we moving and shaping and forming, that type of thinking, things can become quite complex. But just to move away from the military analogies for a moment and connect to the commercial or the business analogy. Consider running a small business. You've got single digit headcount, so you're not employing any more than 5 people. You've got 1 to 5 employees. You're doing maybe $1 million a year, maybe less. Maybe it's in the 6-figure range in terms of annual revenue. Small business. And even if that business is purely virtual, all of your people are virtual, all of your services are virtual, you don't even do drop shipping, there's no physical products. It's even if it's like info products, right? Even that is complex. It's unbelievably complex the more you unfold it. Any business is riddled with dependencies. It's riddled with nested objects. You can decompose levels of an organization, of operations, of experience to levels of nuance that is staggering. There's a concept called an ontology. And first of all, you could think about the old school science class, elementary school science class, taxonomy of animals, right? You've got mammals, and then you've got bears and beavers, and right, you got all of the reptiles and fish and birds, and everything's in like a big family tree. An ontology is similar to that, except it has interrelations between every single node. So as opposed to it just being grizzly bears are a part of the, genus of whatever the, bear is, and then they're a part of the mammals, which are a part of the vertebrates and that type of a thing. It's the grizzly bear is related to the squid, which is related to the platypus and the beaver, and every single one of those things are all related, and the relational line is defined and described. So the ontology, that like study of the being of that matrix, you could use that term. That's what we deal with as expeditionary leaders, because our human capital is connected to our IT systems, which is connected to our finances, which is connected to our pricing and our strategy and our upskill, our services, our upskilling and SOPs and process development and recruiting efforts, our branding and our culture, and the list goes on. Every one of those things is connected. Our project management, our local environment, macroeconomic conditions, all of the nodes possible within a business are related, and it's complex, to say the least. Now, some people say, hey, don't be a bean counter, don't suffer from analysis paralysis, and that's true. We have to be discerning with the level, with the depth of analysis and evaluation that we allow ourselves. Otherwise, we become, as I say, it's infobesity. And that's more prevalent now than ever before with the AI tools. Just because you can do a year's worth of knowledge work in a week doesn't mean that the insight derived is going to drive quality decision and follow-on action. So we have to be discerning and wise with our approach to the information that we have available to us. The business architecture community will refer to that as a relevant level of abstraction. We need to put a viewport on the information that's relevant and abstracted to a sufficient degree to derive quality insights that inform effective decision making and render the most effective action, follow on strategic execution. So complexity, it's the web, so to speak, the interconnected web, where you pull on a spider web in one spot, the whole thing moves because it's an interrelated fabric. And that is the case even for a very small business, even a solopreneur endeavor. There is complexity there. How much complexity you allow into your cognitive space, into your sphere of consideration, that is based on discernment, that's based on constraints. And the theory of constraints will be that's a whole other conversation to have. That's a discipline and a practice. And that's something just like time estimation. We will never get right all the time, but we always want to get better at the discipline and practice of applying the best constraints. So moving on, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and lastly, ambiguity. When I first heard about this, and I was first learning about this many years ago, I kind of thought, well, uncertainty, ambiguity, is that the same? I mean, stuff is kind of mysterious, right? Stuff is unknown. You don't know what you don't know type of thing. But ambiguity is not uncertainty. There's similarities. It's a complementary relationship, but there is distinctly separate features to ambiguity that one must appreciate to be a principled leader in an operating environment to effectively execute strategy. Ambiguity is best displayed by the psychological warfare approach that you could find from Googling, and I'll happily bring in the formal definition, and it's the ambiguity increasing. Is effectively when the noise is increased, where the volume of and amount of instances occurring is completely overwhelming. So you apply volatility to that, where the amount of things is overwhelming, all of the things are changing, and all of the things are connected and interrelated to varying degrees, and some of the things are well known, some of the things are partially known, some of the things are completely unknown. That's the environment. Ambiguity is having a massive array, a massive range of options, where, as you may have heard other thought leaders in the space say, to say yes to one thing, to commit to doing something, is effectively saying no to everything else. And from a physical training standpoint, and in the gym as an example, if you consider neurophysiologically what happens when you lift your arm in one direction, the brain will have motor neurons fire that are specific. So the neurophysiologist will say that there's no such thing as task transfer. There's only such thing as task specificity. So to consider raising the arm laterally versus front and into the front side of the body, that is two different sets of neuronal patterns. So it's just because it's even similar, it's the same arm, it's a similar muscle groups, it's a different geometric pace, it's a different line, it's a different sort of form. Neurophysiologically, it's unique. And I suppose that's a helpful analogy to consider the fact that if you're committing to doing one type of thing, it excludes many other things. And when we are presented as leaders with countless options. We have to be grounded in a number of things. One of them is our aspirations, our organizational objectives, our leader's intent, our vision and our values and our principles and our capabilities. These are the things that allow us to look through a sea of carrots and sticks, of spear tips and shiny objects. It's much like Indiana Jones going through the Temple of Doom, trying to avoid the booby traps to get to the gold at the other side. You have to be very careful which stone you step on. Do you put 5K in ad spend into Meta? What about Google ads? How about SEO? Maybe just organic content. Should we spearhead an affiliates or ambassadors campaign? Do we do outbound prospecting? Do we do trade shows? Should we just focus on increasing our referral program? That's a range of options within one segment of our business, just traffic. And overall, that's within client acquisition, our revenue generation. So the ambiguity is being able to sit back and be confronted with an array of choices, of options, of routes to take. Do you take the ridge line? Do you go by the creek bed? Do you go alongside the creek, right? Which approach is the most navigable and advantageous given our current setup, given our current capabilities and our vision on what success looks like? That is one of the ways, a few of the determining factors for understanding ambiguity. And all of that to say, that is VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. If you can appreciate that reality, if you can appreciate the truth of that, then you've got a first step. You've got a foothold into this new era that we're moving into. Now, VUCA is not new. It's actually close to ancient, and just even the military, the recent generations and the US military coining that term doesn't mean that it's even aged and dated to the formal to the formal date it was codified into military doctrine. It spans history because it underpins human endeavor. VUCA underpins a part of reality that's unchanging. Although volatility and one characteristic of VUCA inherently is change, the fact that change is consistent is that will never change. So thank you for hearing me out on VUCA. This is part 1 of a 10-part series. I'm going to do my very best to knock this out and in a timely manner. If you've got value from this, let me know. I want to hear about it. Otherwise, that's it for now. Next video coming up is on the OODA loop. So we talked about what's the reality, and that's VUCA. And now we're going to talk about, well, how do we even begin to think through this? How do we even begin to approach it? Or is this one of those things that's just, yeah, let's forget about it. I'm just going to work on building my website and posting stuff on social media and hiring people. Well, if that's in the camp that you're in, more power to you. But this series is probably not for you. In fact, it's like 100% for you. But, like I said in the beginning, you got to be cut from the same cloth to have the capacity to appreciate a principled approach. I'll finish by a teaser at the very end of this. We're going to talk about longevity. We're going to talk about legacy. Simon Sinek, the guy who discusses Start With Why and so many other fantastic concepts, talks about the infinite game. And recognizing that business as is a infinite game, and the win state of the game is self-defined. So we can dive more into longevity in our last session, but I just want to sort of anchor into that final point, which will be so many business owners burn out. So many business owners give up. So many entrepreneurs fail for the last time, and they drop their pack, they drop the torch, they run out of resources and wherewithal to continue. And in the same manner that I mentioned earlier, Alexander Osterwalder, the founder of the Business Model Canvas and author of countless books and courses, says the number one job of an entrepreneur is to reduce risk and uncertainty. The principled approach is one of those gifts that keeps on giving, because no one ever rises to the occasion. We fall back on our training, on our baseline. So the way that you approach this VUCA world, this environment that we're living in this day and age, the more your brain is pre-programmed to think these things through and apply the principles you've learned against the patterns you observe in reality, the more effective you will become, the more advantageous your positioning across all levels, and the more successful ultimately you'll be at reaching your defined win state for your business, for your endeavor. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you liked it by dropping a thumbs up or a comment, and I'll see you in the next one where we will discuss the OODA loop. See you then. Logan out.